Okay, I got 6:30, so why don't we get going? First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, taking time out of their personal schedules to be here. I'm Randy Heglin, I'm Public Works Director for the town, and just want to give you a brief history of how we are today. Shortly after I arrived in town back in 2020, Don Lowe, former town administrator, said to me that he had nightmares about the culvert that goes under Route 17 here, collapsing in the middle of the night or something and having to detour all of the traffic that exists on 117. He just felt that that was a priority, that's something we should look at. To that end, and realizing that culverts are a real big concern for town. The town has spent historically a lot of money in culverts, and we're going to continue to spend a lot of money in culverts. I had an assessment done of all culverts in town where we looked at all the culverts and did condition analysis on all the culverts. One of the early ones we looked at was the one that goes under 117. Right here, we video inspected it. They sent a robotic boat down through it to try and take pictures of the stone walls that exist that hold up the bridge. What it is, it's an old fieldstone culvert with a poured concrete top. The recommendation of that consultant that did that evaluation recommended that we begin the planning stages to replace that culvert. So I think that gets us to where we are today. I went out for a request for qualifications, and the town has chosen Green International. With me tonight is Michael Cruz and Amy Allen from Green International. They are the designers for the project. And this is an informational session. It's the very beginning stages of the project. Our goal is to hear the thoughts of the people that are most affected by the project, and to keep you informed of the process, of how it's going to move forward. So I'm going to just turn it over to Michael and Amy, and they can put their presentation.
Thank you, Randy. So as Randy said, we're here to talk about the Main Street roadway improvements and culvert replacement. As Randy mentioned, we are very, very early on in the process. We are just beginning to gather the data, but we felt it was a good time to kind of bring what we have so far, kind of inform the public what it is that we're going to be doing, what are the steps that we're going to be taking, and we're kind of going to go through very briefly since we're still in the investigating phase. As Randy mentioned, I'm Mike Cruz. I'm actually a bridge engineer by trade. I'm the manager on this project, and with me I have Amy Allen, who's our traffic lead. So just a little bit about the presentation itself. It's pretty brief. It's kind of a higher level. We're really looking to solicit feedback and try to get your input as to what the project could be. So we'll go over a little bit about the project location, the existing conditions of both the culvert, the retaining walls, and even a portion of the roadway, what the project objectives are, what we've done so far, and what's coming, design work, funding, and then some open discussion. So here's the project location, as was mentioned. So here is Mechanic Street. The culvert is right here under 117. It does continue a little bit further along. It's buried. And then this is the portion where we're proposing to do some road work. So the culvert itself was originally constructed in the 1940s, but it seems that was a replacement of an original structure. As Randy mentioned, the abutments are field stone, so it's probably an older structure that they came in and put a new concrete slab on it at that time. There are stone masonry abutment walls. Those are field laid, so they're not mortared, so material can get through them. And there's the existing retaining wall on this side here, where it's in need of repair and or replacement. So we're just beginning the evaluation process of that, and that'll determine exactly what can be done with this wall. One of the factors with the design of the wall is this railing that's on top of the wall. It doesn't meet current standards for safety. So we are definitely looking to upgrade the railing at the top for both pedestrian and vehicular safety.
I'm sorry, would that be expected to be like a guardrail that you see along the highway?
It's,
Of that strength?
yeah, it's going to be something of that strength. You know, obviously there's studies that need to be done still. It's probably not guardrail. It's more bridge rail. So it's a little bit more robust. It's got to have, you know, certain pedestrian safety features, opening size, that kind of stuff that need to be incorporated into that railing. Amy?
Yep, thank you, Mike. So I'm going to start by going over the existing conditions of the roadway. So one thing is that the sidewalks along Route 117, they're not in great condition. They're made of asphalt, and then at a lot of locations, especially where there are utility poles, the width required by ADA. So that would definitely be something we want to address. A lack of bicycle accommodations. On this section of 117 specifically, there's no designated bicycle lanes. And then the intersection of Route 17 and Mechanic Street, the western project limit, we understand that there are significant delays along both 117 and Mechanic Street, specifically during commuting times, and then also the school drop-off and pickup times. So project objectives, these tie pretty much directly into the existing conditions. Replacement of the culvert is the main impetus for the project. Upgrading the existing railing to meet safety standards, as Mike mentioned. We'd also, as part of this, evaluate potential improvements to traffic flow, specifically at the intersection during peak hours of commuting traffic and the school drop-off and pickup. The improvement of pedestrian and bicycle safety was something that was identified as part of the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan, which happened, I think it was about five or 6 years ago now. This corridor was identified as needing improvements for both pedestrians and bicyclists. And then also to provide some consistency with the project that was constructed back in 2020, just west of this intersection, just to provide some visual consistency with the sidewalks and bicycle accommodations in that segment of the road. So far what we have accomplished, like Mike said, we're in the very, very early stages, but we have finished the existing conditions survey and are working on the base map development, which will serve as the basis for all of the design going forward. We've completed traffic counts at the two intersections, so at Mechanic and Wattaquatic Hill, and also along Main Street itself, so we can get an idea of what the daily traffic looks like, as well as the peak traffic and fluctuations throughout the day. Using those traffic counts, we've started putting together a model of the roadway and the intersections so that we can start to see how the two intersections interact, and also, again, how that varies throughout the day as traffic flow varies. And then we've also started some of the environmental and permitting documents. So the next steps, first of all, taking any feedback that we gather at this meeting tonight, starting on concept design, using the feedback that we hear from you all, completing the traffic analysis, so we need a better picture of exactly what's going on out there today, and then we can use that to start evaluating any potential improvements to that traffic flow. We have a sub-consultant on board that's going to be performing borings for the geotechnical design in the vicinity of the culvert and the retaining wall. And then we will be in concept plans for the structure type selection. Project funding, so the design, which is our fee essentially, the town received a special appropriation through the state for this design. And then the construction, it's expected to be funded by the MassDOT, the State Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP. So the project went in front of MassDOT's project review committee. They determined that it is eligible for funding through the TIP. However, the funding has not yet been approved itself, and therefore a funding year has not been determined yet at this time. But we are in the process of completing that application for funding.
Does it like join a queue, maybe, of like
That is
other
essentially how it
projects?
works, yeah. So when you apply this year, you apply for, I think it's 4 to 5 years out, and then they if it's approved for funding, it will get put on the list and prioritized and ranked amongst other projects.
The application submitted through the planning agency,
Yes.
and I think right now they're looking at like fiscal year 30,
Wow.
2030, so it's a number of years out.
Got it.
Yeah. That's it for our presentation, so we just want to take this opportunity to hear from you, answer any questions that you have or any input that you have.
Now, when I went, at the very beginning of the conversation, I mentioned how the main concern was the culvert. And when I did the request for qualifications, I said, what are the other avenues for potential funding that we can use? Because culvert funds there isn't a lot out there for culverts. That's why with Mary reminding me of complete streets, every time she comes in, she says something about complete streets. But so anyway, that's why I included some improvements to the roadway to give us a component of the project which would make it eligible for the TIP program. TIP programs won't pay for just culverts by themselves. They will pay for roadway type improvements.
So can you apply complete streets even though the south side of the town center sidewalks were not included in the prioritization report?
Yes, you can.
You can?
So the rule, I mean, this is not gonna be, we're not applying for complete streets funding through this, we're applying for TIP funding, but theoretically, as long as the project is mostly in your prioritization plan, you can improve on that slightly. Although that does have a maximum limit of 500,000.
500,000.
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't cover the culvert portion of this.
Concrete sidewalks?
Would not.
Yeah.
Yeah, how far are we extending the
Yeah.
sidewalks? Because right now, the concrete sidewalk basically ends at 662, and it really should go all the way to 626.
Yeah.
There's a fair amount of traffic, just foot traffic through there throughout the year, and the sidewalk that's there is laughable at best.
Go back to maybe the overview.
We put this here, but maybe this one's a little bit cleaner here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah,
I see
so
that, so
it cuts short
it
before
cut
your
short.
house.
And I'm wondering why it cut short there.
So the reason for that was because we were trying to see how far we could realistically carry a section that would meet all of the MassDOT requirements for sidewalk width, bicycle lane width, travel lane width, and to fit that entire section, it was only able to fit up to this limit here. So that's not to say that the sidewalk could not be expanded in the future, but to carry that full section that would be required by MassDOT and be eligible for the funding, that was where we had to cut that section off.
Would the expectation be that you'd be able to get all the phone poles on the sidewalk in that section?
So we would have to, the newest requirements for ADA is that
Yeah.
at pinch points 4 feet is
Right.
required. So we would have to do whatever was necessary to be done to get that 4 foot minimum.
Right.
And for the property like mine, that is bordering the sidewalk with a stone wall, does that mean that stone wall might have to come down in order to expand that sidewalk?
I don't know.
The goal is to try and stay within the layout.
Yeah, we would be trying to stay within the layout as much as possible. I can't really say either way as we haven't like gotten into the specific design, but if you want to give me the street number so that we can look into that.
Can I add mine to that as well? We're at 662 Main. We have like this much front yard.
Okay.
Yeah, the goal is to stay within the right-of-way. The roadway width that we're proposing, there could be some reduction, in the overall width of pavement to add to the sidewalk. That's,
I fully agree that the
Yeah.
sidewalks need a lot of help in front of strollers that are off-roading with their children.
Yeah.
But I also worry from a selfish personal level that the 1 foot we have of clearance from our out to Main Street might disappear.
Yeah, there is, I think it's a 60-foot right-of-way width in this section, so the section that we are likely to go with is not expected to expand beyond that 60-foot right-of-way. So we're hoping to, at all costs, avoid any sort of easements or takings and just stay within the town's property.
Are the current sidewalks within that 60-foot?
The current sidewalks are, yes.
And would you be improving the sidewalk on both sides?
That's
Because I
the
know
idea.
it kind of curls around and then it ends after Town Hall on the north side.
Yeah.
Will you expand that? Because I live I guess I live right at the end of the project at 651.
Over here?
One more towards Town Hall.
Oh, this one.
Nope, there's one in between. That's me.
Okay.
Yeah, so just wondering, because the sidewalk ends at Town Hall, but then it turns into, you know, our front yard is within that 60-foot right of way. You know, curious to know if like you're gonna be blasted through it or not. Or if you'll work on the existing sidewalk and then maybe not add more where there isn't any.
I mean, the goal will be to carry that sidewalk as far as we can, like we were discussing before, trying to fit that section as far as we can. But
Yeah.
obviously, if there's going to be like severe impacts or any grading concerns, then it may
Maybe
not be feasible
Okay.
to do it for the whole limits. The way that the MassDOT tip funding works is, once you apply for the funding, the limits themselves are pretty set. So you can go smaller, but you can't really go wider, or longer, I should say, at that point.
Okay, yeah.
So the goal is to, you know, carry that section as far as we possibly
To
can.
the end of that
Yeah,
line.
yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Yeah, and, you know, as we mentioned, because we're early on, the base plan is in the process of being developed. Once we have that finalized, we can get a much clearer picture of where all the property lines are, where, you know, the sidewalk's being expanded, and then we can, you know, obviously take a closer look at all of that. Yes.
Yes, so I was going to ask a question on that. I don't live in the town center, but I am a board member of the Historical Society, which is 676 Main Street. And we have a fence that's pretty much close right on the sidewalk, the existing sidewalk. And I don't know where our property line ends. And I'm assuming that it probably is it's inside of the fence area. So, would the fence come down and then be put back by?
If we find that the fence is in town property, we would need to discuss with the town as to where to put it. But the idea, if any fence is touched, is to remove it and reset it, put it back. Yes.
The culvert itself, when the robot boat went through, which is cool that those even exist, was it found to be collapsing?
Wasn't found to be collapsing. The whole sides of the culvert are made with field stones.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what they found was voids within the field stones that they couldn't really determine how deep the voids were or how stable they were, because they were just looking at a video photograph. Give you an indication. This is on the inlet side, right here. And it's pretty much the same type of material on both sides, and then there's like I mentioned, a concrete poured top. And another picture from the outlet side, where you can see the field stones are further in. There's the concrete poured top, and they're seeing a lot of voids within the walls that they don't see. Could really evaluate real well.
The reason I ask, we're at the blue house right on the corner of Main and Mechanic, and we have a love-hate relationship with Pond Park. When it floods, we flood. And we've been in town a little over 15 years now, and the pond itself has become less of a pond and more of a bog, and continues to silt in and fill in. And so what I'm asking is, this hasn't come up, but maybe when you folks are doing all the calcs, all of the, because I'm sure that the modern day culvert is going to be not a fieldstone culvert. So the water is probably gonna rush through a lot faster. It's going to want to get from one side of the street to the other a lot faster. Is there, and Randy, I don't know if this is if this is a different project, but one of the concerns that we have is Parks Pond already gets overwhelmed with the yield rough lined culvert that's there. Once, say, a new modern structure goes in, and that water rushes to, if that area isn't dealt with on the other side of the street, we've seen what happens. Obviously, we're in an extreme opposite spectrum right now, where everything is bone dry. But are you folks gonna be sort of looking at, once the water gets across the street, where does it go?
Yeah, so as part of the culvert replacement, there will be hydrology done and hydraulic. So most culvert projects nowadays, including this one, will probably require a natural bottom. So the velocities
Yep.
through there are going to be very similar. Yes, it's going to be new material as the walls, but the channel itself will be a natural looking channel. So the velocity shouldn't increase, but that's all part of the study that still has not occurred and is part of the.
So if essentially, if the drainage on the downstream end is currently inadequate, just replacing the culvert and not doing anything isn't necessarily going to solve that problem.
It would not solve that problem. The goal would be not to make it worse.
Okay.
It looks like the culvert goes in front of this building. Is that for the scope of replacement too?
So there has been discussions with Randy about this portion, and we're trying to see if we can open the culvert up in that area.
Oh, okay.
Get some environmental credit. Obviously, rather than replacing a structure in that area where it's not needed, really kind of maintain the structure within 117 really, and kind of see if we can open up that portion of the channel.
Okay.
Kind of clarification, I guess. Based on that picture, that, I wouldn't call that a culvert, and I don't mean to be fancy words. It's a bridge. You've got a concrete overlay that you talk about, very analogous to someone who doesn't know bridges and culverts and stuff. But that looks like a bridge deck. And I look at the length of it, that going through the street, this is significant. And I'm not sure, because, I've been living here a long time, and it just, I see one end coming out, it doesn't look like that big a deal. But this is a big deal. Essentially, it sounds like you guys are gonna be, or someone, will be digging on either side, putting in presumably some kind of concrete structures that go down, and at the end, you're gonna have what I would call more formally a bridge. Rather than, I think of a culvert, I think of a tube stuck in the
Yeah,
dirt.
there's a federal definition between bridge and culvert, and it has to do with span, and we're less than the bridge span. You have to be over 10 feet to be considered a bridge.
Okay,
Anything smaller than that is considered a culvert.
okay.
So we are in the culvert, but essentially,
Yeah.
from our point of view, they're the same thing. I understand what you're saying, you think of a culvert like a pipe, something like that. But the way we design a culvert or a bridge is exactly the same. There's no difference. And I understand what you're saying, but in this scenario, it probably, we haven't advanced that far yet, so I can't answer what we're gonna do, but, in my head, type of things that we would look at would be, like a box culvert or a three-sided culvert. The idea is, with working with Amy and the traffic, is how to build this thing in a way where it's least impactful to the commuting public.
For what it's worth, I've seen a number of videos where the understructure bridges, culverts, they just dig the heck out of the other side and they slide a reinforced concrete tube underneath the thing and they're done. They never touch the road. Is that happening in the US these days, or am I?
It does happen, micro tunneling or slip lining, those do happen. This unfortunately is not a location where something like that is feasible because the depth from the top of the road to the bottom of the culvert is very shallow.
Okay.
So no matter what you're doing, you're gonna be impacting the roadway surface.
Right.
So when you have a lot of fill above your culvert, you can do some of those things that you're talking about, whether it's
Right.
microtunneling or slip lining.
Yeah, I think they even, they shut it down for a weekend. They did everything, shut it down for a weekend, cut the street, pushed the thing in, cleaned it over, done.
Yeah, there's
48
definitely,
hours of intense work, but
and these are things that we'll be looking at as we
Yeah.
develop conceptual, it is construction duration, you know, because there's opportunities, you know, sometimes it's almost like a Band-Aid, people rather pull it off all at once
Yeah.
and, you know, maybe
Right.
do something for really impactful but really short duration,
Right.
whether something that's less impactful for a longer duration.
right.
But those are things that still have to be investigated, and that is gonna be part of the process that we are gonna be going through. Yes.
So speaking of impact, I know that you guys are trying to improve the walkability. In addition to the sidewalks, will there be any additional crosswalks installed or a turning lane into the school to prevent some of that congestion and traffic?
So I don't believe we were planning on any additional crosswalks. I know at Mechanic Street, you have those flashing beacons at the crosswalk. As far as turn lanes, that will be something that we evaluate as part of our traffic analysis. Obviously, it has to be balanced with like what we have available for width. But it's certainly not out of the realm of something that we would evaluate. Actually, MassDOT they have a procedure called intersection control evaluation, or ICE for short, and they require you to look at essentially every possible configuration that you could do to an intersection, and it balances things like safety, right-of-way impacts, environmental impacts, cost over the whole lifespan, not just construction cost, factors in maintenance. So they have this very, very robust program that they require every intersection to go through. So essentially every possibility is going to be looked at and weighed based on all of those variety of factors.
I thought at some point, Randy, please correct me, I thought there was at some point we painted white bicycles in a lot of lanes on both sides going through here. To my mind, it would be bike lanes. Is that the case out here? Because I thought I saw something about we don't have bike lanes. I thought we had.
There is, trying to find bike lanes at the 1 o'clock intersection coming easterly.
Okay,
It ends just before Mechanic Street.
Yeah, so the idea would be to try to carry that section if possible.
so right out in front of this, just a little bit east of here, on the other side of the camp, there's a wide lane of some sort. Starting with the dirt, a wide lane, a white line, car lane, and yellow lines. That lane next to the street not be considered a bike lane? Is that
I
correct?
think he's referring to the,
Under the existing conditions,
In the condition.
for a section of road that we have had.
On this page,
It's not a bike lane.
right here.
go to the.
Yeah, it's just, what they did was,
You're talking this area right
Yeah.
here.
This area
right
here,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
okay.
those lines were just to keep the traffic centered in the road when past work was done. Those
Okay.
lines, there was a narrowing because they found that people go faster when they have visually more space, so the right line was just to sort of.
But the cars still cut around other cars turning in, and you take your life in your hands when you're walking.
Right.
Yes, yeah, and I know that was a problem at Watt Aquatic before that turn lane was added as well, so that cars were just zooming around.
Yes, so what is the intent for the new bike lanes? Are they going to be dedicated bike lanes where the shoulders are now, or are they going to be just a shared lane, traffic and bike lane?
So it would not be a shared lane, MassDOT does not allow that, or it doesn't count as a bicycle accommodation essentially. So the question would be, what type of, is it an on-street bicycle lane versus they're also doing shared use paths, which would just be essentially an extra wide sidewalk, like 10 feet wide, that would accommodate both bicycles and pedestrians. So because we're going through the TIP MassDOT process, it's going to be required to be a designated bicycle facility, and we'll have to evaluate.
One or the other.
Yeah, exactly, which type of dedicated facility that is.
So you're saying that it would be different than what was created from Watt Aquatic to Mechanic Street? where there was just a, if you want to call it, bike lane that ran alongside the white line, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're
It's a
saying.
dedicated lane.
It is dedicated, and I'm not saying it would necessarily be different, I'm just saying we would evaluate a multitude of options, we wouldn't just,
How could you do a shared use path? I mean, you would need a lot more space, wouldn't you?
You'd actually end up needing about the same amount of space, and I'm not at all trying to say this is what we're doing, but you do end up needing about the same amount of space, because say you have 5 feet for a bike lane, 5 feet for a sidewalk, it just becomes a 10-foot wide sidewalk or shared use path, instead it has the same footprint.
Oversimplified, it would be from the white line over to the dirt.
Right, yeah, and I'm not at all trying to say that's what we're doing, it's just one of the options we would evaluate,
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
So that between the white
But
line
it
and
would, I mean, but it would be protected. I mean, a shared use path is not just a line drawn on the road.
No,
Exactly.
it's
I mean, you're
elevated.
talking about a dedicated,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's still a curb, and then you have 10 feet versus 5-foot curb and then 5 more feet, essentially.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Tom Hess. I live at 698 Main Street, right across the way. Just like on that picture, like, are you guys like anticipating having to move the electric poles and like relocate those off of the road space, off of the sidewalk? Because right now they're right in the middle of most of them. So like, I guess that's.
I think-
so where do you put them?
I think those are discussions that have to be had with utility companies. Those have not happened yet. Typically in areas like this, it's very hard to relocate them anywhere other than the sidewalks. So the goal would be to make sure we provide enough space that our sidewalks would provide ADA passing space.
Yeah, and I believe at Aquatic, they were just relocated to the back of the sidewalk, and that is the most likely scenario. If you had to relocate them, you push them all the way to one side or the other so that you get that 4 feet clear.
And it sounds like this area from the white to, that's my driveway right there.
Oh, okay.
So it sounds like the white to the edge of the road that is often used as parking now will go away. The parking will go away in that area.
I'm not gonna say for sure it would go away, but it's possible that it would, depending.
Because you're gonna need that space to, because the sidewalk right now is about yay big.
Yeah,
You know, so-
and right just to the west of Mechanic, there's now parking just on the south side only, whereas I believe there was parking on both sides before, and then
Okay.
they use some of that width for bicycle accommodations. So
you don't
it's,
want to lose parking spaces.
nobody wants to lose parking spaces, I understand.
I'd be willing to lose parking spaces if we had better sidewalks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sir, yes.
The other question was like, so when they're redoing the culvert, like, what's the intensity of like the demolition? Like, we have some older houses, right?
Yeah.
So is it gonna cause cracks and other things to break in our area because they're having to do explosives? I don't know, like, so.
Yeah. There's definitely not going to be explosives in this scenario, but as part of our design, we would certainly include monitoring. So that's very common when we have constructions near homes or other facilities, is that they'll do a pre-construction survey, a post-construction survey, and depending on the proximity, there may even be monitoring during construction activities for excessive vibrations. That is pretty common. Most contractors in our area are aware of stuff like that.
I don't know about anybody else's basement, but my basement looks like that built stone that's in that culvert.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, just getting back to the culvert itself. So obviously there's gonna be some hydrology involved, like you said. And it maybe perhaps, and this falls into the category of as you're planning, just keep this in mind.
Sure.
You're likely gonna have to, you gotta do something with the water, if there's water there, and divert it somehow. Many of the, I can speak for us, our house has a shallow well. And so in terms of monitoring, I would appreciate it if the project would take on water testing before and then water testing afterwards. I think that we're actually on a perch water table, which is even more precarious right now. We're having fun with that. But then, just also even slight changes in hydrology, like the pond drying up or overflowing, affects our our well. I can't speak for the rest of you, but those of us who are on shallow wells, I mean, we're talking like single pipe jet well, not even like a two pipe. So, you know, if we're out of water, we're out of business kind of thing. And so it's just something to keep in the planning that
Yep.
we're on our own little puddle here.
Is it, the fact that it's you're going through the TIP funding, would there ever be a case where you realize that you can't push the road, that you're out of space without doing like extensive redesign? Would then the bike lane have to be shelved, or is it because it's TIP, it has to be put in?
So because it's tip funded, you would have to have like a really, really strong reason to not put a bike lane in.
Got it.
Which actually goes back to the question from before about how the project limits were decided. So we did take a preliminary look into it and see, you know, where we are. We know that we're able to carry that section that incorporates everything that we want, and we use that specifically to define the project limits. So
Okay.
there should not be a scenario in this case where there is not a bike lane. It's very unlikely, especially given that we chose the project limits specifically based on where
The
we
fact that
can
you
fit
wouldn't be
a
able
bike
to do
lane.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
I have something. So
Yes.
I'm on the historical commission. I'm just Bob Taylor, so.
Sure.
So people here have real, I guess, have different interests than us. You know, they have houses that are close by. We were kind of come to the consensus that the culvert, bridge, whatever we call it, that concrete barrier and that iron railing are just kind of don't fit in here very well. And I don't know, you know, basically our chair thought that we probably wouldn't have much influence on what actually was put there in the end, or maybe you can say we do, I'm not.
There's limitations because as part of a TIP project, there are safety requirements for any railing that goes on a roadway, and that is that they must be capable of redirecting vehicles back into the roadway. That limits the type of railings that we can use. They tend to be very robust.
Are there any that are historically friendly?
So there are, but usually the workaround is to have a historic railing on the back and then a non-crash-tested railing on the front of a sidewalk. That tends to give a very urban feel to a structure. I'm sure you guys have seen them somewhere. You know, we could consider it. I don't think that this is probably the setting for something like that. So yes, you could have a historic railing on the back or historic looking railing on the back, but you would still need to provide a crash tested worthy railing somewhere, and usually that means at the face of the curb.
Yeah, I think, I just, you know, be sensitive to the fact that this is in a National Historic District. And so any work that you do, just be sensitive to, you know, the way it
Yeah,
is.
I mean, we certainly will consider that, and I will say, you know, that is one area where our hands are usually very tied because of the safety concerns. In order to use a railing, it has to have gone through federal crash testing criteria. There are not many that go through that criteria because it's very expensive to do so. So we usually, like most state agencies, including MassDOT, they fund railing testing, and then they decide, okay, these are the type of railings that are going to be available for your use in these scenarios. And it does include curb-mounted railings, should you want another type of railing in the back.
So my concern is that this is a very preliminary stage.
Yes.
And what I'm seeing with these roadway projects is, as time goes on, the costs go up tremendously. I mean, we're looking at that maybe with the roundabout, you know? So with the TIP grant, is it an unlimited amount of money that, let's say, the project is approved, it's down the line to be done in a couple of years, and the original figures all of a sudden are like $1 million or $2 million more, are we still good?
Well, so when we apply for the TIP funding and we have to give an approximate construction cost, and when we give that cost, we take today's cost and we automatically, we know it's going to be built in the future, so we increase the cost in anticipation of the fact that it's not going to be built tomorrow. So there's a lot of, on our end, contingencies and inflation built into the estimate that we are going to be putting in the application that we submit now, to cover any increases that we see down the line.
I'm very sensitive to Mary's remark because she related to a roundabout project where
Yeah.
initially it was proposed to be 938,000 or something like that. It's now north of 1.6.
Yeah,
So I'm very sensitive to that, and we had to do a lot of scrambling and utilize some Chapter 90 funds to make up the difference, and I kind of don't want to be in that same boat with this project as well.
For the TIP funding, the state cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, but with the TIP funded, I mean, whatever the price ends up being, the construction is covered by the state.
You're not going to be asked to make up any difference.
You're not going to be asked to make the difference. We've all seen what's happened to construction prices. It's nationwide, and yes, it's going to continue to go up. What we try to do is try to capture what we feel is a significant amount of inflation and contingencies, so that the number that we provide, Mass DOT, would cover the cost at the date that it's being constructed.
And I believe then MassDOT even adds their own contingency on top of that in the money that they put aside. So, yeah, they
Yes.
they do factor that in.
Yes.
Sorry I missed the very beginning, so I know that we're early funding year has been determined. Like, is there a ball, 1, 2, 3, 5 years, 5 years out? Okay, and then so, because it's contingent on that, do you have any say over the time of year this could happen? Hey, we need this to happen in July and August because the school's right there, and it's only one. They're gonna tell you it's happening September 1st.
No, there is absolutely input onto when the construction happens.
I just didn't know if they controlled that timing or if there was some say with
It's a little bit of both. I mean, we can create documents such a way where there's limitation, especially when you're over waterways. Usually, construction has to happen in a drier season anyway. There's permits, that need that. Obviously, if you're very close to a school, as you are here, we certainly are not going to be looking to impact those vehicles. So, yes, time of year restrictions are part of what we usually prepare in the contract documents if they are needed.
Yeah, for example, we have it working on a TIP project in Worcester, and we put right in the specs that, it can't happen in Blue Sox season. So there are, these types of things are put into the contract documents.
This probably isn't a fair question, but I'll ask it anyway. Given, you must have some idea in the back of your head, vague as it may be, how long this will take to complete and how long the disruption will be along 117.
It is a little bit unfair at this point. I will say that, because we're going to look at various options, different options are going to take different amounts of time. I think if you're building half at a time, it's going to take longer. If you try to create a scenario where and I'm not saying that this is a possibility here because we haven't done all the traffic analysis, but there's been places where we said, okay, we can close it for 48 hours, get it out and get it done. There's those options, but those are all things that we're going to be looking at. We really have not even started that because we are just at the very, very start, and really what we're trying to gather is as much information so that we can proceed with the next step. Yes.
Would there be a case where, this is more of a town of Oldham question, where the funding comes through MassDOT and, it covers the project, but maybe they wouldn't cover something like a crosswalk, like you were mentioning. Could that be supplemented by the town maybe, or I don't know.
Well,
I don't know how that works.
If it was, if there was a desire for a crosswalk and we did kind of like an engineering study and agreed that that was a good place, that's not usually significant enough of a cost where MassDOT would refuse to cover it as part of a project like this. So it's not to say that that cannot still be added and still funded under this MassDOT as the
And
project
there is
progresses.
that crosswalk right next to where the project starts.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Yeah,
on the
that's
other
what's
end,
on the
because
Okay,
the beam, like that
Yeah.
plaza is just
Yeah.
getting bigger and, you
no,
know,
that's fair.
there's a lot of people going in and out of there and,
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah,
a little harrowing to
With
cross.
5
Yeah,
and
I think there's some safety concerns with
Sure.
the locations of crosswalks too.
Yeah, we
so-
would have to do an engineering study, essentially, look at site distance, look at vehicle speeds. You know,
Right.
we don't just wanna throw up a crossing
Oh,
wherever,
totally,
because
yeah.
it actually is less safe to just put a crossing in a location that hasn't been like fully vetted, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's not, if it was determined that for safety purposes, a crosswalk should be added or is warranted, or whatever it may be, it can be funded through this project. Just because it's not proposed at the very beginning doesn't mean it can't be added in further down
Okay.
the line.
and also, I guess, no, I know this portion of road fairly well, and it would probably end up being outside of the span of the project. I guess that's why.
Okay, in that case, then, yeah, it probably, like I was saying before, how they're pretty strict on the project limits. If you
Right.
wanted something east of the project limits, say, that would probably have to be funded
Got it.
separately.
That's what
Um,
I'm imagining.
Could potentially go through complete streets or something like that later on, but
Mhm.
it wouldn't be able to be included in this project if it would be on the limits.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I know you were talking about potential traffic improvements and there's studies to be done. Is there, like, is putting a light in there considered or not considered? Like, are certain things, like, not even, hey, we would never look at that versus we would actually consider it in this study?
So everything's considered.
Everything's
In the MassDOT, intersection control evaluation process.
I just know if there's, like, spacing things, like, we have a right light down there, we can't have another light this close.
Well, if they were that close together, they would just have to be very closely coordinated, so you wouldn't want one being green and one being red, that would just make things worse. So, you know, when we do have to consider a signal there as part of the MassDOT process, and the modeling of that would be such that it ties very closely into the signal adjacent to it. But yeah, the way the MassDOT process works is it's a 3-step process where the first step is an initial screening, and that at that stage you would throw out anything like just ridiculous that doesn't fit the area at all. And then after that you identify viable strategies, and then you move on to looking at them more in depth and looking at doing the actual traffic modeling, safety analysis, cost analysis, all of that happens at the next stage. Yes.
So if you're looking at the whole space and considering any and all options, does that mean you would look at the intersection and say, hey, you know, the crosswalk where it is right now actually isn't the safest place for the crosswalk to be? It makes more sense for it to be moved 10 feet over, and would you do something like that if that
Yep.
was the safer? Okay.
Yeah, we'll
So
certainly look
it's,
at that.
it's not like this is where things are, that's where it has to
No,
be, we
oh,
work
no,
around
no.
it. Okay.
No,
The
no,
current-
no.
the current crosswalk, obviously it was put in, that was a project and everything that was done, it was put in.
Yeah.
And I feel like it is an extremely unsafe crosswalk. And I don't honestly know if it can be made safer. Someone mentioned earlier how people are going westbound on 17, they will stop to take a left down to Mechanic. The person behind them will decide to just go around them. And oftentimes my child is trying to cross the street at that exact moment. And it's only a matter of time before someone, we use the crosswalk all the time,
Yeah.
but it is extremely dangerous. And it's because even though those lights are flashing, people are just either they don't see it or they're not paying attention, I don't know.
Or they're not following the speed limit.
They're so focused on what they're doing, you know, and so
Yeah.
you've got, I have repeatedly seen, you also have Houghton building traffic sometimes pulling in and out, and so it's almost like a four-way intersection, if you count this parking lot. And when people make that extra lane that doesn't exist, so just something to know.
Yeah, no, certainly, and as part of the addition of bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, it is likely that travel way would narrow, so it would be physically impossible for cars to pass on the right. That would be a goal.
But even, you know,
So,
people
is
don't
it
pay
poss-
attention. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, if people aren't paying attention and, you know, just because the first car stops at this, crosswalk, the second car sometimes doesn't.
Right.
And,
And if a
yeah.
turning lane went in,
Yeah.
you would still have that same problem where, cars could be stopped and you think they're stopped because they're turning. That's what often happens, is that the person sees someone stop, they think, oh, they're stopped because they're taking a left, I'm gonna go around them. And they're not stopped because they're taking a left, they're stopped because someone's in the crosswalk. And so I
Right.
think even if there was a turning lane there, that problem wouldn't necessarily, you can't see, So
Yeah,
it's hard.
yeah, agreed, and like this whole intersection evaluation procedure, I was discussing that, the addition of that left turn lane and how it interacts with the crosswalk would be a big factor of the safety evaluation. So it's possible that once you throw that in, the turn lane is eliminated due to safety concerns.
So that happens a lot on Main Street, is if somebody's turning into a driveway or whatever.
Yeah,
But would a pedestrian island be effective for that? I mean.
it could,
if
it's
there's
something,
room?
it's something that will be looked at, certainly, yeah.
What's a pedestrian island?
Like a median
little
island,
Oh,
like a
okay.
median
I was
island,
like,
yeah.
what is this island?
I mean, but you,
It's
and you
something
could
we
do
could
a
look
raised
at.
concrete one so that the cars,
Yeah.
instead of just,
It's an idea, yeah.
paint striping.
Yeah, this tiny little laughable lip.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, those good traffic calming.
In a neighboring town in Hudson, they've also done like heavy-duty paint, where it's sort of like a red or green, it's not just the white lines which
Yeah.
fade really quickly, it's like very,
The high visibility
Yeah.
markings, yeah, okay.
What about speed bumps?
Yes.
Yes.
State number of the route.
Yeah,
There's speed bumps on the state numbered route in Medford.
yeah.
They're able to do it.
I think there's some in,
I can add it to something that we
Yes, definitely.
look
I think there's some in
into.
Waltham too.
Yeah, I just know the ones in Medford.
well, especially if
that
it's,
we
if it's
used to live there, so.
crosswalk, I think it,
Well, yeah,
I think you have to lower the
crosswalk.
speed limit at the same time, because otherwise,
38.
all we'll hear all night is
Something
car spotting.
Yeah, we can look into the vertical deflection as well for
Yeah.
speed management.
I'd be
Tractor
very
trailer
interested in
bounce on.
crosswalks. Yeah, then the tractor trailers can find another route.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it doesn't like raised,
Yeah, right.
Raised
protected,
crossing.
protected, well, I don't say like bike slash pedestrian lane, it would need to be very clearly visually offset, so people don't like forget it's there and try to
Yeah.
pass someone and just curb off it.
Well, right, yes, that's a good point. Okay. So just in general, traffic calming measures, something we should
Yes.
look
Mhm.
into
Definitely.
along
Increase
here.
safety of the walkability.
Right, and narrowing of the lanes helps with that too, widening of the sidewalks, all of that helps with traffic calming, but that'll definitely be evaluated, yes.
I'm gonna do the devil's advocate thing, because I live right after Mechanic, and so I
Okay.
can take a left into my driveway pretty much every day. And it's really impossible to kind of do that, right? Like, without people be going on the right side, like, I will sit there for 5 minutes to try to turn in my driveway, and the only way traffic moves is for them to go around me, right, on the right. And so, like, just like as we're thinking about, like, oh, we need to slow people down, like, this could be a giant bottleneck too, because we do live here and we do have to pull into driveways and
Yeah.
take lefts into places, and then all of a sudden cars just idling outside our houses all day, right? And
Yeah,
so,
fair
while
point.
yes, we need to be safe and make the spaces, like, we also need to be able to get our houses in both directions.
Yeah.
People who stop right in front of your driveway while they're in dead stop traffic and won't let you in.
Yeah.
Or they're speeding off, coming off, I mean, they're coming from Asia, they just got through the light, and they're just like, so they're traveling, and that's just a
Straight
stop.
away, yeah.
Like, it's like pretty much waiting for like that little gap of, between Wattaquadock and Maine, where I can be like, oh, I can turn here. Right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So again, like, just the flow in that area is already congested for lots of different reasons. And want to make it safe, and don't want to add more congestion to an already congested area.
Right.
This is more of a town of Bolton question as well, but where this project is potentially 5 years out, and the roundabout, I believe, is in correlation with the new high school, would these traffic patterns change at all once the roundabout is completed?
I don't think there's enough distance down, I mean, I would leave it at that, but I don't think there's any effect on this with the roundabout.
When are you anticipating the roundabout?
It's on construction this spring.
Oh, okay.
Where's the roundabout from?
From high school.
So it will have been operating
It
for
would
a few
operate-
years by this
Exactly,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect any effect on this area based on that.
Has the new development behind the bean and everything, and the traffic associated with that been considered in terms of the increased pattern on 117?
Yes, so we were provided the traffic study for that development, so our future year volumes will incorporate the traffic that's expected to be generated by that development.
Yes.
So, looking at trying to alleviate the traffic backup at Mechanic, I do know the master plan committee was looking at other options for school traffic to exit on other roads rather than Main Street. They were looking at Waterquatic, they were also looking at Berlin Road. So, I'm not saying that is happening, but this has been kicked around, that that might be something to consider when you're doing the traffic analysis, is if there are going to be any plans on trying to find a secondary egress out of the school.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely good to know. Anything else? Questions, thoughts?
Just the turning radius of the school buses. They're often in our front yard. So just, I know that like, probably gonna wanna tweak the geometry of that
Yeah.
area to slow things down, to squeeze things down, but the school buses, they get rowdy.
Yes, we will certainly model those bus turns and make sure we accommodate those radii. That's a good point.
Yes.
I guess just building on what Steve says, like, are you looking at doing anything on Mechanic Street? Like, can you go into the park at all? Can you widen that street, or is that off limits with the park, just thinking about the turning radiuses?
I wouldn't say that it's off limits. It's going to be based on the traffic. Are you thinking like whether there should be multiple lanes coming out of
I'm just going back,
Mechanic,
for the buses to take turns into there, like,
Yeah.
a car can't be up at the intersection and a bus turns down there at the same time. They have to be further back for the bus to actually fully turn into that.
I see
And
what
so I didn't know
you're
if, like, if you made Mechanic, again, 5 feet wider, would it allow cars to actually go up and buses still make that turning radius? I just didn't know if it was like, no, we can't touch the park, we can't, take any land from that or widen Mechanic at all, versus that is something we could possibly look at. I didn't know how
No, I would
protective an
say
area it is.
Yeah, we would definitely have to work with our permitting group and to look into what the permitting implications would be, but I wouldn't say that it's off limits. It's definitely something that we could explore.
Is it automatically considered when you're applying for the grant? Like, is it something that you guys would automatically include?
I wouldn't say automatically. That's kind of why we're here, is to hear these things from you. So we can certainly consider it.
The project includes some work on mechanic.
It includes exactly what's shown here.
Yeah, so we did include a portion of mechanic. The idea of touching the park is something that we would have to investigate much more, because there are certainly bigger implications permitting wise when you're touching the park property.
That might help the flow of the buses heading east,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that they don't have to get into the westbound lane like they do now.
Is that what they do now when they
Yeah.
turn out? They're over
Somewhat, yeah.
You should
Depends
probably
on
come by.
Maybe I should come to school time and
Yeah,
take a look.
yeah.
Monday through Friday.
If you get there
Sit
like
on your porch.
around quarter of
Yeah.
3, and stay till about 3:30, you'll
Yeah.
see what happens. So, you'll have cars coming out of Mechanic that, like I said, they have to stop far back oftentimes, because the bus is going, right, like you've got buses coming around here that are coming over the sidewalk. Cars are usually stopping here, because if they're here, oftentimes they can't fit. And the whole thing requires a cop to stand there and direct traffic, otherwise it takes about 45 minutes for the cars to clear out of Mechanic Street. So it is a very congested area. I mean, the feasibility of sending buses in different directions would be amazing to cut down that, but I don't know how realistic that is. And what we were just talking about with crosswalk that's there, like those ideas of like raising it and everything, I don't know how buses would handle, you know, like,
Yeah.
I love the idea of having a median strip, right, where you sort of, we made it halfway across the street, you can take a breath before you keep going, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if the buses could fit through with such
Yeah.
tight, I don't know.
And then whatever we do end up designing there, we have a software that you can select any vehicle type and you can run the turning movements and it's a pretty conservative in the turn radii. So as long as we can, you know, fit it through there on the software, then we know that we'll be all right. So, yeah, but we'll definitely run those turns in and out, regardless of what we do there.
I know this is getting into the real weeds, but since there is a hydrology project, and the fire pond that the department often uses is all the way down Mechanic past Emerson, just at the curve before you get to Sawyer School. And you know, that's a lot of distance to travel and then maybe to be like pinned in by traffic. And I don't want to speak for the fire department, and Randy, I don't know if you've spoken to them about this either, but I think that also Pond Park used to be, the pond used to be used as a fire pond to draft from, and now because it's, you know, full of stuff, it can no longer be, but I didn't know if there was, because we don't have fire hydrants, we have fire ponds, I don't know if you know, while they're in there digging, if there was any kind of connection that the fire department would want, so that they would have to travel all the way down back toward the school to fill up, if they, you know, minutes count. So, just a thought.
Is that second fire pond still viable? Or is it filling up like Pond Park is?
The one by Sawyer?
Towards, yes.
Yeah, it is. They're
Okay.
still using it so
All right.
far anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Getting back to sidewalks, I'm looking at Mechanic, where your project ends. And the sidewalk along that strip to the school is really in bad shape. And it just seems really odd that you're going to do half of a good sidewalk that's ADA compliant, and then it's going to end and have this narrow asphalt. Is there any way, I mean, it's not a long, it's not that long a stretch of sidewalk that you could extend it to the school?
We can look into it. I can check. I think, like I said, I think the project limits are pretty strict once the funding is applied for, but let me check into it.
I mean, it's gonna look really weird.
There's currently no sidewalk on the left side of the street, and that's our house. And our house, in some places, sort of abuts the road. I'm not,
Well, it abuts the road.
I mean, it abuts the road. I mean, we have stairs that just walk down to the asphalt. So I don't know how a
Well,
sidewalk.
I mean, just
Yeah.
because it's in the little, in the yellow square doesn't mean, are you intending to extend, or is the thought to study the intention of putting a sidewalk on the, I guess that would be the west side of Mechanic Street?
So the main intent was sidewalks along Main Street, and then we just kind of included that portion of Mechanic Street for tying in purposes.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't one of the main thoughts that we had, but
That
again.
yellow line looks like it's on top of your house.
Yes, it
Well,
goes through the
it's
house right
rough.
now.
They're gonna give us.
They're just gonna take a piece of your kitchen door.
Yeah, like it's definitely, like I said, the house spills right into the road on that, just in that
Yeah.
section right there, you know.
Yeah.
There's a difference. I thought it was the other. Essentially, yeah, take that side and then flip it around, you can use that length on the,
Yes,
from
get to the
Mary's,
school.
the rest of
Yeah.
it to get to the school.
I have one last question. Going back to the historical aspect of the, whatever guardrail or whatever it is. I have driven through other towns where, like in historic centers, maybe they take something that's not very attractive and they just paint it black, or, it's like sandblasted, right, or something, whatever, it's like, it's powder coated, thank you. And so maybe it's matte finish, or maybe it's a shiny finish, but whatever, it sort of gives that ye olde-ish
Right.
look.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, instead of, you know, a shiny guardrail that looks like it should be on 495, like, could it be sort of?
No, yeah, no, in this location, it's not gonna be guardrail, I'll tell you that. Okay, it's gonna be a bridge rail because you have a significant, guardrail deflects, so you need space behind it. So if a vehicle were to impact it, it needs to be able to redirect. So whatever rail we put there can't deflect.
Okay.
So it's not gonna be guardrail, so it's not gonna be shiny silver. It's bridge rail, can be painted any color the town wishes. And yes, a lot of people go with a matte brown or a matte black to try to hide it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the black looks nice. Yeah.
Will you host, like 5 years out is a while, but maybe as the project gets a little closer, as your parameters start to suck in a little bit, will you be able to host another forum like this, or is this our opportunity?
I will say, yes, we're open to having other meetings. These are just informational meetings.
Yeah.
Once the project does go to a Mass DOT tip project, there will be an official public hearing where everything gets documented by a stenographer. It becomes part of, you know, public domain. So that will happen. That usually happens, you know, a little bit later at the 25%. Should, you know, the town wish to have an update beforehand, before that happens, yeah, you know, we'd be happy to give an update.
We actually talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
As a butters, we would probably get some kind of notification that construction was gonna begin as well, right?
I would sure think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just wake up and find out.
You don't know what it's been like here.
Yeah, exactly, I was just gonna say, 117 was repaved,
That
they
was
just woke
amazing.
up and
Yeah, it
the house was
was
shaking.
1 o'clock in the morning. And they were doing pave in place, like digging it up, melting it and putting it back. And it was an interesting couple of evenings. So we appreciate this. This is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it's very preliminary. We appreciate everybody's comments and input, and, you know, at this point, you know, give them some thoughts to go back with and make it a better project for everybody.
Awesome.
And when the design is developed, will that be published before it goes to hearing?
So typically at the public hearing, plans will be available, but those, usually the public hearing happens at 25%, so it's not, you know, final plans even. The plans themselves, once complete, are not typically distributed for public, but they are distributed to the town, you know, for their review.
I'm just curious, did you do the first phase? The, where Main Street got new sidewalks up, was it 2020 or 20 years ago? No.
Anything else? Think so? If additional thoughts come up, there's a, on our Public Works website, there's a clip there, the message the department. Feel free to message the department, and I'll forward any more additional comments to Green International, the folks at Green. All right? I will, just as a FYI, when I get plans, like the 25% or something, I try to put it on our website as one of the project pages. I did that with the roundabout. I expect
That was super helpful.
I expect to do that the same with this project as well.
It's a great way to do it. I'm gonna go look at Cole. I think I've seen this side of.
All right, anything else? Thank you everybody for
Thank you
taking
for
the time by
your
night
time.
to come here and provide some input to us. Appreciate it.